Good everybody and welcome to Russell Heritage Golf. Today we're going to be talking about the downswing sequence. So we're going to be talking about the events that should happen in the downswing to give you the best possible chance of hitting the ball straight, compressing it with iron and driver. We're going to be breaking it down so that you understand the simplicity of exactly what needs to happen, but also why it needs to happen. If you can understand why it needs to happen, you've got a much better chance of being able to implement the correct sort of changes. We've got some good little tips and some drills for you as well in this video, so let's start talking about this sequence in the downswing. And so, as we start talking about the downswing, what we need to do first is make the presumption that you're in a decent position at the top of the backswing. The way in which you're going to do that is, I would suggest, as long as your weight is in the right heel and you've stayed centered, then you're okay to progress. If you're uncertain, then there's plenty of videos on the channel which you can find in the playlist about the backswing position. What we now need to do though is we need to understand what is happening in the downswing and the sequence of events that lead us up to making contact with the ball. Well, the first one is the change in direction of weight pressure, which then kind of already asks a question as to what part is the downswing. My kind of suggestion would be that as we kind of going into the backswing position, you would be finding your way to stay centered and get the weight in towards the right heel. What I tend to see with very good ball strikers and more athletic golfers is that they don't tend to continue swinging up to the top, kind of having a pause and then try and shift weight in towards the left. What I tend to see is that as they're still going up, roughly by the time they get to left arm horizontal on the backswing, as they continue to swing up, now they start to put pressure in towards the left-hand side. It's like a momentum shift. And when we think with any other side on sports, it becomes quite logical. You know, imagine if you went bowling, your arm would go back as you step forward. If you were going to throw a ball, you'd go back as you step forward. If you were doing baseball, you'd be kind of stepping forward as you're still swinging the baseball back. It's going to help you gain momentum, so when you come into the hit, you're going to have more speed. So I suppose the first question is actually the first thing I want you to think about in the downswing is to kind of make sure that actually by the time you're getting about left arm horizontal, this is the point where now you would start to introduce a little bit of a lateral movement. Lateral movement has to exist, right? It doesn't have to be a huge movement, but moving laterally is how you're going to shift weight between the feet. Obviously, we want the golf swing to predominantly be rotational based, and we'll explain why in a moment. But the first thing to understand is actually as you're going up, this is the point where now you want to start shifting in towards the left-hand side. A simple drill for this is like a stepping exercise. You start about a foot right to the ball. As you start to swing the club back, you replant your left foot forward and then you swing through. This would give you that sort of feeling for that kind of change in direction of the weight as you're actually going up towards the top. Once we understand that the weight is shifting on towards the left-hand side, the next thing that we need to do is we do need to start creating rotational movements in terms of the lower body. We need to make sure you are moving out of the way of the golf ball. Again, going back to any other side-on kind of sport, a lot of the sport will be about shifting the weight and then anticipating the flight of the ball coming towards you. So if you were my kind of tennis opponent, I'd be watching the ball come over the net. I'd be making sure my footwork, anticipating the flight of the ball so I can create space. Same with football. If you pass me the football, I'd be watching the flight of the ball and I would step in accordingly. What needs to happen in golf is obviously it's very static movement. But what I'm trying to suggest is that we need to make sure you don't encroach the ball. You have to make sure you are triggering a rotation. So it's the same as the other side-on analogies, but what we're doing in golf is to make sure that you're creating space so your arms can swing in front of your body. That's a really important thing to do. The question is, how do we do it? Well, what we can already presume now is that as you're still going back, you've actually started to get the weight in towards the left-hand side. Now what we need to do is we need to get the hips out of the way, because obviously if the hips get in the way, then we're never going to have a desirable impact position. So what we need to do now is we need to start feeling this lower body rotation. We are playing golf, the ball is located on the floor. Therefore what we need to do is we need to make sure the hips are staying very much downward facing. By doing this, this is going to help you trigger that sense of rotation. What you should start to feel very early on coming into this downswing is that as you start this kind of initiation of trying to get out of the way, you should feel the weight pressure going towards the left heel. The question is when? Well, you would do it as soon as the weight's in the left. As soon as you can feel that weight in the left, as much as you would if you threw a ball, you'd push weight in the left, you'd rotate out the way. Baseball, you'd push weight in the left, you'd rotate out of the way. It's exactly the same with the golf swing. So if we now understand that the weight is in my left hand side very early on coming in towards this downswing, well, from here now I am just trying to kind of transfer the weight so it moves more in towards my left heel. By doing this, I'm focusing on keeping my belt buckle very much downward facing in towards the ground. If my belt buckle starts to work more horizontally, then I'm going to be drifting closer to the ball. It's a big amateur problem. From here, I can now feel the weight in my left heel. This is a good position to be in. It means that I've now got all the weight still in this left hand side. I've kept my hips downward facing, so I've created space. The question is now, what about the upper body? One of the problems that we see with the upper body with most amateur golfers is that they might understand the fundamental movement of the lower body, but then the upper body starts to swing in this sort of direction. So the right shoulder is kind of rotating around and working kind of in front of you, if you like. That's a problem, because now it doesn't matter how much you try and shallow the club to keep the club working on the correct angle, you're always going to be swinging above plane, which means you're always going to have a discrepancy in the club path coming in towards impact. So it's a problem. What needs to happen is that the right shoulder needs to drop vertically at the start of the downswing. So what you need to feel is that as you start to trigger this rotational aspect of your swing, you need to simultaneously get this feeling of the right shoulder dropping vertically down. What this will do is it will help have a shallowing effect on the club, but more importantly, it will just stop you doing what I've previously mentioned. Again, a lot of people kind of struggle with this move, but when you relate it back to any other side-on activity, if you're going to throw a ball, you would do this. You would not go straight away this way. Yeah, baseball, if you were going to hit a baseball, you would do this. Yeah, you would go into external rotation. You would drive your elbow forward if you were going to throw. You would drive the elbow forward if you're going to hit a baseball. Then you're going to hit it and release. But in golf, we just seem to have this feeling of going this way. You would never do that if you were going to throw a ball, or if you did, you're going to do well to throw the ball beyond 5 yards, and it would explain why you can't throw the ball very far. So already by relating these patterns of movements back in from golf into other side-on sports, it becomes a very logical process. We are stepping to put pressure. We are rotating and putting pressure down in towards the ground. I am now delaying the release of the ball, for my example as a throw, by driving my right elbow forward, and then I can throw and release. Now going back to our golf swing, it would be the same. I swing up to the top. I need to shift weight. I've shifted weight and I'm still pretty much at the top of my backswing position. I'm now getting my hips out of the way, I'm rotating them out of the way, and I'm dropping my right shoulder vertically downwards, which is known as a lateral bend. From here, this gives me the freedom for the right elbow to operate in front of the right hip. This means that I'm holding on to all these wrist angles, so I'm going to have so much power when I come to release the club. Now as I come to the hit, I can start to thrust up and get through it. I am basically in my golf swing going up, down, and now I can come up and hit it. And if you can get yourself into a very good transitional position, then you are going to see a very desirable impact position. Now, don't get me wrong, this is motor learning. There's lots of different things going on, and I don't mean to sound condescending as to how simple it can be. But also what I am saying is that if you can understand the logic of it, you've got a much better chance of actually implementing it in towards your game. Now, how do you do it? Well, I would suggest doing the sequence drill, which I'm going to suggest now. Become really good at this drill. You've got a chance of it coming to fruition. What you're going to do is you're going to get yourself set up over the ball, right? You're going to swing up to the top, and this time you are going to pause. Now, what you need to do is then, before you start this drill coming down, you just need to shift a little bit of weight left. Then as we come down, we need to turn the hips and drop the right shoulder, and I want you to pause by the time your left arm is horizontally placed. The idea is that from this position, then you can get up and hit the ball. So the drill is going to work very much like this. Up to the top, pause. Shift a little bit of weight left, fine. Now what I want you to do is I want you to start moving the hips around as you allow the right shoulder to drop down. Now you can see how subtly I'm doing this move to the point where my left arm is still located at horizontal. From this position now, this is where I want you to try and hit the ball. The feeling will be that you'll start to create more of a thrusting motion, which means that you're going to start to feel like you're rising. You don't want to stay down too much in the hit. This is the time to get up and to use that energy to create an extension and get through the ball. Now this drill will take time, it will take coordination, but what I'd suggest is here's your opportunity, right? You guys that are familiar to the channel, you know that I give you the opportunity to send your swings into the social media links that are coming up onto the screen now. How about you do the drill? You do the drill at home, you do the drill down your local driving range and you send it in, right? If you send it in, I can offer you tips on how to improve this sequence drill to give you the best chance of it coming towards fruition. And we can all learn together. I can share it on the channel if you're happy to, or if not, then I'll happily offer you some advice to make sure you're moving in the right direction. This drill is important that you become good at it. One of the questions that would pop up is what should the club face be doing? Well, if you kind of swing up to the top and you start moving the lower body and you drop the shoulder, then it means that the face will still be potentially a little bit open depending on how you grip the club. Which means that if the club face is coming down open, that's okay, but you're going to have to need a high rate of closure coming in towards that hit. Which means that you're going to have to roll the hands a lot to be able to get the club face square. This then lends itself to kind of discrepancies of leaving the face too open or manipulating it a little bit too much. What I would suggest is that you try and introduce this feeling of squaring it sooner, which means that both forearms are going to be rotating downward. Whilst you're rotating both forearms downward, you're trying to hold on to flexion and extension of the right wrist. What this then means is the club face would start to come down a lot squarer. If the club face comes down squarer, it means you won't need as much of a flip and a rolly release. It means you can keep the club face squarer and therefore would lead to a much tighter dispersion when you come to hitting shots. So there we go then, right? That is the drill. That is the sequence of events to what you need to feel. That is it. If you can focus on shifting weight in towards the left hand side, rotating the hip so you can feel the pressure going towards the left heel. If you can then get this sense that the right shoulder is dropping vertically down to the point when your left arm is horizontal, then you have a very good chance. There's obviously other elements that we can introduce into this, but I think this is enough to understand the fundamental sequence as to what needs to happen coming in towards the downswing in its simplicity. If you can mirror these kind of patterns of movements, you've got a very good chance of becoming a more athletic golfer. So this drill as well you would use with the driver. You would do exactly the same sequence. If you struggle with the driver and you feel like you are better with your irons, then I'd suggest you do the same drill. It's a great drill. The idea of this drill is that yes, you won't hit the ball as far because obviously you can't gather as much momentum, but you should be able to hit the ball pretty straight, pretty clean with a good contact. If you can't at first, persevere, don't give up. It's an important drill that you become really good at. As ever, always appreciate one of those. You know what to do if you want to send the swings in. What is absolutely free as much as sending the swings in is that subscribe button. Press the little bell icon as well. You'll receive notifications every time a new video comes out, and I'll catch up with you soon.